Welcome back to Mortuary Mayhem, a podcast by funeral service professionals for funeral service professionals, where any day above ground is a good one.
Welcome back, folks. We have a great episode today. We're going to talk about the Final Salute. So on the air, we have Lanae Strovers from The Final Salute. She's also, you may know her in her other role as the trainer for the NFDA. So very familiar face on the air with us today. Do you want to introduce yourself? Let us know, maybe a little bit about who you are before we get started.
Sure. So like you said, my name's Lanae Strovers. I am a licensed funeral director and embalmer here in Iowa. I work full-time for NFDA, which is a remote position for me. Most of you are like, isn't that in Brookfield? But it is, but I'm just remote. And I get the awesome opportunity to go to mortuary schools, state associations, and teach the arranger training program. I also still hang my license at a funeral home here in Iowa. We do about 2,000 calls a year, so we are very, very busy, which is great that I can still go in and serve families and being able to help the funeral home. And then lastly, and why we're here today, is I'm the president of our nonprofit called The Final Salute. Final Salute is a nonprofit that we find unclaimed cremated remains of civilians, children, and veterans and lay them to rest with dignity and honor.
Excellent. Yeah, and I look forward to I know you're gonna be joining us in Bridgewater for that, for your training there, for the master skills there, for the ranger training, which is awesome. So for Final Salute, how does this work? And I know I've seen a couple posts about this. I've seen some videos, and you have a lot of people involved in this. This is a full blown. You're doing a service here, right? So tell us what are we actually doing here?
So Final Salute was born 8 years ago, and it kind of happened by accident. Just to give you a little bit of a background to understand how we put these services together. So I had to have a very intensive hip surgery. I got diagnosed with hip dysplasia. And when I was recovering from that surgery, I was in a hospital bed for about 3 months. And during that time, I had asked my owner of the funeral home, hey, do you have a project I can do? And they said, sure, we've got this list of people that just never got picked up. Their urns are still sitting in the basement. I was like, okay, sounds good. Well, when they finally gave me the list, it was like 300 people. And I was like, holy crap. Like I'd worked there for years at this point and never knew that was that many people. So once we got to the end of that list and there were still people left over, that's when we were like, I just don't feel right about them sitting in the basement. So we should do a service. And the veteran service is very much our largest service. So that is, like you said, it's a big ordeal. The very first year we did it, we had 3 veterans that were unclaimed. And I set up like 20 chairs. I didn't really expect that many people to show up. And all of a sudden there was like 300 people there. And I was like, funeral director panic of like, I got to set up more chairs and all this stuff. And it's really just grown since then. It's really, it is a funeral, but it's almost more of an event. We get so many people in the public, that would take part in it. And it takes about a year of planning to do one of these services.
Oh, wow. So this is not something we're just throwing together. This is something that's well thought through and, planned out. Now, so you do this for a lot of funeral homes. Do you group them, or is it, hey, I'm coming to the Dan Shea Funeral Home and we're going to do all of yours? Or is this like, hey, look, I'm coming to Massachusetts, I'm coming to Rhode Island, and we're going to do everybody that comes from anywhere?
Yep. So we do right now, we are only actively doing services in Iowa, and we do a service once a year. And this year we have 5 different funeral homes that are involved. So if there was a funeral home per se that said, we'll let you do it, but only if you can do it for just our funeral home, we would of course work with them, because it's the most important thing is that we're doing the service and getting them off the shelf. But the group services work really well. And the community loves what we're doing. The veteran community does. And so being able to say, okay, every year we're doing this and kind of having a date out there, people plan vacations around it. People plan days off of work around it. And so it works better just to do the one day a year so far.
Okay. Now, is this something that, because you're in Iowa, is this something that, because I know we have listeners from all over not just the country, but the world on here as well. And I know I see the maps light up every time we do an episode, which is getting bigger and bigger, which is great. So with that, if people are interested in this and they're like, hey, look, I know we're not going to, fly you out necessarily for this and things. Is this the kind of thing that like there's a template where maybe mentor and say like, this is how we go about it. And this is something that you guys can do in your area?
Yes. So we are working on building that template. What's really exciting about this year is I have a funeral director from Texas, Erin Wilson, is flying up from Texas. She's going to be a part of it. And then I have a funeral director from Wisconsin who is going to be coming down. They're going to be parts of the service because they want to start this in their states. And that's where we want to be able to grow Final Salute. They can operate under our nonprofit as long as they follow our rules and regulations of what we think is important and follow our game plan. So this year, instead of just trying to remember everything in my brain of what we're doing, I'm making very detailed notes of every little thing I do so that I can create this template and say, hey, take what we're doing. It works fantastic. I've already put in the work of what works and copy paste and do it in your state. I'm also getting to go to London next March, and I'm going to be doing a presentation. Unclaimed cremated remains is a huge problem in the UK. And so I'm going to go over there and visit with them and try and start a template of what to do to help them over there as well.
Excellent. And this is just, I know we have a lot of people listening and, we have a lot of licensees that may, that understand the depth of this problem that we're discussing too. And I know we have a lot of people that are maybe interested or just people that are enthusiastic and want to know more, but this is, I think every funeral home basement is overwhelmed, maybe a good word, with cremated remains. And I know that's kind of like the milestone. I know we see it in a lot of trade magazines. It's every so often you see the article of, okay, who has the oldest cremated remains? And I know I've merged funeral home locations of the places I've worked, and same thing. It was like, all right, some of these cremated remains have been sitting here and we haven't used the location in decades that this location hasn't been utilized. It was basically what I call a really expensive billboard. We send you to the other location when you sign up for it, but and you're pulling out of I'm pulling out a prep room cabinet. It's unbelievable. So for those that don't realize the depth, this is a pretty, it's a space thing. Yeah.
Well, it's a space thing, and it's also a respect thing. Our biggest challenge is there's this weird thing that happens when somebody's cremated. We forget that they were a person. It's like they lose their humanity. Last year, when you're talking about the oldest set of cremated remains that you've got sitting there, last year we buried a gentleman who served in the Civil War. He died in 1929. And that was a very humbling experience, but it was also very sad. He sat on the shelf for almost 100 years. And that was really hard to kind of wrap my head around. This year, we have 2 veterans that served during World War I. And being able to look at that history is so important, but it kind of seems to be like the elephant in the room that funeral directors don't want to talk about. I've talked about this topic. I've flown to multiple different states and gave presentations on this. I still will get some of those old school funeral directors that will come up to me after the presentation and say, stop talking about it. We don't want to deal with it. Like, why are you, don't talk about it. And like, that's why we do need to talk about it, because these people are sitting in our basements.
I think that goes for anything in depth. Nobody ever wants us to talk at the dinner table because we don't talk about what they want us to talk about. But, we do need to talk at these conversations, because you wonder why people are scared of them is because as you said, we don't talk about it. But the reality is, the space thing wasn't necessarily like, hey, we don't want them there. But, there's a point where we're funeral directors, we respect, we never forgot you, we know you're there, but are you really you're not on the current roster, are you, there? It's, what do we do? Because how do we give you that dignity, which is what you're really doing. How do we give that dignity? Before something happens, of course, with it. But it's, for those that don't realize this, maybe you can talk to the state laws aspect too, because, getting rid, I'm going to say getting rid of, that's not the word I wanted to use, but, giving them the dignified service and getting them out of the funeral home maybe touches into these state laws and how hard this really is to do unless you have a method to do it. So I don't know if you can touch on that.
Yeah, the hard part is, and I've really realized every state is so different, right? I mean, that's the key of all mortuary laws. From one state to another, it's wildly different of what you can and cannot do, and that doesn't change for when you're talking about rules and regulations for cremated remains. Some states have some incredible laws in place about, by law you're required to make so many phone calls and then send a certified letter. Some states are, after 60 days, we don't care if you throw them in the trash. There's other states that say, okay, after 90 days or 120 days, you can bury them, you can't scatter. Some states say you can scatter. So that's the hard part right now, is there's not a lot of congruency with state to state. And that's been hard. But what we've done, and what I tell funeral homes is, if this is a reoccurring problem for you, put whatever your state rules are of how long somebody can sit before you can respectfully dispose of them. That has helped our cause quite a bit. And we're also finding now too, I'm encouraging my coworkers to have the conversation, especially when we're dealing with a guardian or, a distant relative that they're not making any plans for the disposition after cremation, like what's going to happen. And that's where a lot of times we can get ahead of it. So now there's a little mark on our cremation authorization that says, I request my person to be included in a group burial. And so then we're not trying to, 15 years down the road, oh yeah, this person had a guardian and we knew that they weren't going to pick them up, but they're still sitting here.
Yeah. I think, as you said, every state is we got the whole spectrum between states, and I think that makes everything we do difficult for our jobs, because it's really, really, there's very little consistency, which makes it hard to figure out, like, how do we come up with one consistent method to make this work. But I mean, I've heard it all when funeral directors have come, because they, obviously being a professor too, people do look at you as a consultant and say, like, how do we do this? Like, what, the laws, like, can we do this in our state? And it's not easy. It's
No.
It's, I think, maybe time consuming. I think, because you're saying, like, you have to have those certified letters, those phone calls. I'm busy. I'm doing services. I'm embalming. At what point in my day do you think I have time to be sending certified letters?
And that's that's kind of our selling point for us to funeral homes, is it is time consuming. And I mean, it's no secret that funeral directors, they're short staffed right now. Everybody's busy, everybody's working more. And for that extra stuff, it just doesn't come. So especially here in the Des Moines area and in Iowa, I mean, it's a pretty easy sales pitch of, I'm going to do all the work for you. You just need to give me your files. I'm going to slap your name on it and make you look fantastic in the media. And you didn't have to do anything other than just giving me permission to do it. And so that's worked really well for us. I have a board of a few people that help me, and I have a group of volunteers that are genealogists. So we do all the work voluntarily, but we also fund it. So like I said, we're a nonprofit, so we do fundraising. So it does not cost the funeral home anything for us to come in and to do this.
Because that is time. I mean, that time consuming, but it's also price, because you think about it, if you have to bury those, that's a cost to the cemetery. So you're putting these all in the same lot in a cemetery, or is there, like, they get individual plots, or is this kind of a mass service?
So we do it a couple different ways. So the veterans, we have Iowa Veteran Cemetery, which is beautiful, and they have partnered with us. So each of the veterans and the spouses get their own individual space. We do all of them in the columbarium wall, except for our Civil War veteran. We did bury him in the ground. We just felt that was going to be more appropriate for him, and they gave us a time period headstone, which is pretty cool. But the rest of them go in niches and have their own spaces. The civilians, we do, everybody stays in their own individual urn, and then we place those into a vault, and then we bury those. We have some spaces that were donated to us that we do for that. And then the children, those are all in individual urns, and then we put them in one big vault as well. So that those two, children and civilians, those are all in a group burial scenario, but the veterans are individual at their veteran cemetery.
Okay, and they're different cemeteries, so that they're able to, and the veterans, at least, they're getting all their burial benefits still and all of that, I would imagine. So,
Yep.
Okay, so that's a thing, yeah. Because a funeral home, I know, and I think that's maybe where we run into issues too, is that there's the cost. There's a cost factor. If I have to go and open a plot, there's a fee associated with that, and that's out of my pocket. So, you know what?
Mhm.
It's free for them to sit in my basement in the, on the shelf or in the vault or whatever I put them in my
Yeah.
basement, because that's free, and I think that I know places I've worked too, is that, people I've talked to, one of the fears is, and I've, said, well, we could do something like this, maybe not to the extent that you're doing, but like, hey, let's help. And they go, but what if what if somebody comes back? Like, what if someone comes back and like, this person died in 1920, but what if somebody comes back and they say, you have our great grandfather? There's the risk, but so how do you handle that? I'm sure you said genealogy and all that. So there's records. So if you're doing this and they're unclaimed, you can say that we know
Yeah.
where they are now. Yeah.
So we've had a few people come back, and that's probably the biggest question I get is, well, what if we bury somebody wrong? Well, first of all, we try very hard not to do that. Like I said, we have a large group of genealogists, so it's more than just okay, this is the person's name and dates and birth, and okay, the next of kin who we had on the sheet didn't answer, so put them in there. We do a lot, and the law does not require us to do that. We just do that because we feel it's the right thing to do. So a few different circumstances. We had a gentleman reach out to us, and it was right after one of our veteran services, and he goes, I think you guys buried my dad. And my heart just like sunk, like, oh my gosh. And he goes, I'm so happy that you guys did that. He continued to tell me the story. When his dad was in his late 80s, he married a very, very young girl, like in her 30s. And he died pretty quickly after that. And so, as we all know, the spouse is the legal next of kin, right? And I don't think that there was a lot of love based in that marriage. So when he died, the children didn't have anything to do with it. And so she never told him what they did with his urn, anything like that. Fast forward 10 years, I get a phone call that there was a Department of Veterans Affairs office that the person had retired, and they were cleaning out the office, and there sat the urn in the closet. And so we tried to find family and weren't able to, so we buried him. He had a very distinct name. Well, the son was a police officer, so any social media or anything, he used a different name for. So we could not track him down. And I was like, I tried to find you. He's like, no, that's good. Like, I run under the radar for sure. And he's like, we just never knew what happened. And I said, if you want him back, we can do that. That's not a problem. He goes, no. He goes, that's perfect. We've had probably 5 or 6 family members come forward after things. We had one lady, she called us and she goes, I think you guys buried my brother in the civilian burial. And long story short, he had actually died by suicide by cop. And she had shared that he had been a missing person for years. I mean, 20 years out of a different state. And I'm not sure what happened at the time of his death. It was a long time before I was even licensed. But somehow his family did not get contacted. And then we were able to then help close that missing persons case.
Oh, wow.
And then we did a disinterment and we got his urn back and we gave it to the family.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yep. So, and there's been 4 or 5 other stories like that, but they've always been positive. I've never had anybody mad at us because we've done it.
No, I can imagine that most people would be grateful too, because again, that's, who knows where that could be. And I know there's been many days where, urns were taken by families, but I can count the times where somebody knocked on the funeral home door and said, I have an urn here. I just won a storage war at a storage facility.
Mm-hmm.
Here's the urn. And there was one case, I think it was like 3 or 4 urns that they had brought me, if I remember back. And they had 3 or 4 urns that were sitting in the storage unit. And it was like, here's these urns. What do you want me to do with them? But they weren't mine. But they just said, we went to the local funeral home. You're the big funeral home in the area. So we figured, your lights were on. Here you go. And they said, can you help us? I said, absolutely. There was no paperwork on there. It was the generic plastic box urn that we get from the crematory. This is not some fancy urn here. Yep. But the paperwork was gone. There was no paperwork taped to it, anything. But luckily, they left that tag on it, the dog tag, their cremation tag on there. So I luckily I called the crematory. They had to go back on these records. They looked at the number when I gave them the number over the phone. They said, you got to be kidding me. They said, we got to go back into the paper records, and that's got to be in the beginning. They said,
oh, wow.
it's going to take us a serious month to even find the box that paperwork is in. So it took them a very long time. And about, I think 2.5, 3 weeks later, I did get a phone call back and they said, we located the record, but these records are like old. They said, there's no way in chance that this contact information is around. So we basically stored the urns in the funeral home.
Mm-hmm.
The crematory knew that we had them. We knew we had them. And if they gave us the name, so we were able to now put a piece of paper on it with the name, so we knew who it was, and that was it. But better than a storage facility.
Yeah, and that's where we've. I was actually just working on. We have a video that we're going to play at our veteran service this year, and it has the pictures of every veteran that we have, or the name, and then I put a little comment under it of where the urn was. And our urns, we've gotten them from all over the place, multiple storage units, abandoned houses, apartments that people have gotten kicked out of, cars that are at the salvage yard. I mean, one was in the middle of an intersection. I mean, it's just crazy where these urns come from. And I think too, it's, we as funeral professionals need to look at the big picture of it, because cremation's only rising, right? But once that cremation happens, we don't have much control over once that urn goes out the door and we hand it over to the family. And I tell people it's this way, if I die and my son takes my urn, he loves me. I'm his mom, right? And then my son dies, and then now it would be my grandchild. The next generation has his grandma's urn and his dad's urn. Oh my gosh, he loved him so much. It's my grandma and my dad. Well, then the next one, I didn't even know my grandma or my great grandma, but now I've got her urn, my dad's urn, my dad, grandpa's urn, all this stuff is generations. You're going to start having all of these generations of people. And by that, if you get 4, 5, 6, 7 of them, the cost of burying a lot of these urns is astronomical. We're going to have a huge problem on our hands.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I know it's, again, I'll cremate families all day. It's a great service. But personally, I'll tell you, it's one of my bigger fears. I'm like, what if if anybody cremated me, what are you going to do with me? That was one of my fears, maybe because I've seen it, maybe because I've seen these urns land up in closets and things like that. And I said, if nobody knows, and I know my parents have always said that too. They're like, oh, no, we're going to be cremated. We're going to, you're going to hold on to us. And then when something happens to you, you're going to put us in the foot end of your casket. And I said, when something happens to me, I'm going to put you in the foot end of my casket. Now, if something happens to my brother, I can put you in the foot end of his casket. And he could put you in the foot end of my casket. But now my brother lives in Alaska. I live in Massachusetts. My brother does not know where my stuff is in my house. Okay. I don't know where his stuff is in his house. So if something were to happen to the other person, would my brother know, or would he, I know where that urn is? Or are you going to end up in a random thing because nobody knew that's a nice plot. Here it's at the thrift shop. So because we glued it shut and they couldn't get open, they didn't realize what was inside of it. So so I do have that fear. So I'm glad that, at least having a dignified service, they may not be getting to that family directly, but at least it's better than,
Yeah. And I think too, I just saw this on the news and I didn't ever hear, and maybe you did, but I think it was in like New Mexico or Utah, somewhere, Arizona, that there was somebody found all these piles of cremated remains out in the desert. Did you see that?
No, I didn't hear that.
So I need to go back and find it. But when I'm reading it, it was this huge thing. Oh, all of these cremated remains are dumped out in the desert. And I'm thinking, you know what? It was probably a funeral home that had all these cremated remains that were never picked up. And they're fully in the extent of the law. But as we both know, anything that has to do with death in the headlines, probably gets painted this horrible picture when they were probably I need to go back and look into it. But that's an example of that's what's going to happen, right? Is a lot of funeral homes, budgeting is tight anyways. They don't have the time or the effort to do something like what we're doing, which is no shame on any of them. Like, this is not about, oh, these funeral directors should be doing this, because I get it. That's why we're doing it, to help you out. But when you do have a funeral home that's like, all right, we live in Montana or Arizona, we're going to go out to the desert, we're going to scatter these cremated remains, and somebody just happens to stumble upon it and it becomes negative when it's actually they're being respectful about what they're doing. That's another issue that people are fighting as well. And so that's what I tell funeral homes, like, even if it's legal to scatter in your state, don't. You can't ever take that back. Always keep them intact. I mean, I know that that's harder to do, but if you are going to go through and do the program, that's my biggest piece of advice, is don't scatter.
Yeah. Yeah, no, and I know my family has, like, what they'll do is they'll keep everything together, and then there's, like, out in New Mexico where I have family, it's like they walk up in the mesa, walk up in the hill, and then they'll take, like, a little bit, and they like, all right, we're putting Uncle John, or we're putting Grandma, or we're putting, and they're like, there's like this one cactus that if it ever dies, I swear my whole family's underneath it. But, but they'll put a little sprinkle, and they actually just did that. My great grandmother, my great aunt, passed away sometime in May, and last week or week before that, I didn't get to fly out. I made all the prayer cards, I made all the information, and sent them on their way with it because I couldn't make it. But they did. They few died in California, and the same thing. They went back to that cactus in New Mexico in the mesa, and they dropped it. But no, but even like, to your point though, I remember visiting my brother a couple years back, and we were hiking along. I mean, in the snow in Alaska at that time was well above my head. So when we trudge, you sink. So, you're walking on top of it. And I remember walking up, and all of a sudden it was like this Altoid container or something on the side that was left, but it was left open. Like, and that was the thing. It was exposed, was like, it was supposed to be closed, but somebody probably went, oh, I wonder what that is. So as you walked along, you could have like a piece of a fence that was sticking up from the snowbank, and, like a wooden rail fence or something, and along the path where people patted down, and somebody had left it open, or somebody had opened it and then left it open after that. And my family walks by, and they said, that looks like bones. And there wasn't fine powdered cremations here. We were looking at, serious, it was definitely obvious it was cremated remains. So they walked by, and they just like, hey, Dan. I'm like, what? So I, trudge over, and they said, is that cremated remains? Look, I took, of course, half of a glance, I looked and said, yep, that's exactly what you're looking at. Yep. So so respectfully, I closed but they had left it on a rail fence. It was just left there in the snowbank and stuff. Mm-hmm. So I respectfully, kind of, the nature of what we do, but I closed it up, and I respectfully kind of trudged it over to an area where I left it there, but I trudged it over to a place where nobody would kind of disturb it so that it would stay where it was and all of that. But, no, they just left it on the rail fence. It was just, so, it is shocking. And
yeah, I think people would be shocked to know. I mean, if you would test sand on most beaches, I think you would be floored. I was doing a presentation for the insurance division, and they had representatives from almost all 50 states there. And I was presenting on this, and there was a group of people that were from the Myrtle Beach area, and they're just like, we will not walk barefoot on Myrtle Beach. And they're like, and I'm like, oh yeah, okay, I'm following you now, and they're just like, because we know, and that's part of it too, is I think people would be shocked to realize where all cremated remains find themselves.
Well, think about every sports stadium, Disney World. But like, I always love to tell people, I'm like, Disney World has a funeral home, and they go, they does? And I'm like, yeah. And they're like, why would Disney World need a funeral home? They don't have enough going on? No, it's to combat. I use it as a point to combat issues. Not even related to funeral. I use it when I'm talking to people non-funeral related. I said, they do it to combat an issue. Mm-hmm. My background's also in public health, so I'm always talking about combating issues in public health too. But I said, they're combating an issue. I said, you realize that they drain every time they drain Space Mountain, that the thing is full of cremated remains from people dumping it. You realize that when they check in your bag, it's for not just for selfie sticks. They're looking for cremated remains because they're waiting for you to scatter it. Mm-hmm. I said, what do? They said, let's make our own funeral home, and let's have a scattering guard in the shape of Mickey Mouse that's like behind it. I think it's like his head. Mm-hmm. Perfect. We just combated an issue, and we gave you a place you get to spread here, but we've at least told you where you can spread it. And I think it was the same thing. What's the state that does? And there's more than one that does the Viking burials there, or the open air burials there.
Yeah. My brain isn't wanting to work.
but they did the same thing where it was like, oh crap, these people are going to be lighting up, we're going to have body parts on the beaches,
Yeah.
So they do, like they said, you have to do it at pavilion, you have to do it at least they said you can do it, but you're going to do it under our supervision or something.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. Which is kind of maybe a smart way to go about that, and keep control on it.
Yeah.
So when you're doing these services and things like that, you're saying there's a lot of roles involved. So you're fully invested. I know Aaron was there. I think I saw Jolina's name on something as an urn bearer or something like that. I think you had posted, or
Jolina's not. I would love to get her to come out.
Oh,
but
okay.
She's not this year. But so every veteran that we serve, they get 4 representatives. And this was kind of a brainchild of how do we get people to come to the service that we know that they're going to show up, like in the early days when we were doing this. And then it kind of took on a life of its own that people really, really want to be in these positions. And so the 4 positions is we have somebody who is a storyteller. So like I said, we have genealogists. It's more than just dates, branch, the person's name. We really dig into their lives, find pictures of them, tell their life story. You don't go to a funeral and not hear about the person. So we do a lot of research on them. So we have a storyteller. Then we have a flag bearer, which that person carries the folded flag from the church to the funeral coach. And then out at the cemetery, they carry the flag as well. Then we have an urn bearer, which is exactly what that is somebody that carries the urn. And then we have a flag recipient. So the flag recipients, we put a lot of thought into. These are individuals that will actually keep the flag as if it was presented to the family. Mm-hmm. And these are people that we know understand the sovereignty of being presented with the flag. And so we try and get different people every year. And, now we've buried, when we have this service in October, our number is 87 veterans and spouses. So just take that times 4. Those are all the representatives we've had to pick over the years. But we get people from, our governor does it. We have congressmen who do it. We have different leaders from the veteran community. We just really try and get as many people involved as possible. The cool part that has happened with that is it's become this really unique networking event too, because I'll get phone calls that say, hey, Lanae, I got a veteran and he needs a wheelchair ramp built. Do you know anybody or a group that does that? Or, hey, Lanae, I got a veteran who's really struggling with mental health right now, but he loves outdoor stuff. Do you know a group that does like outdoor research or, resources? Or, hey, just whatever that is. And so because we get so many different groups involved, we've become this networking opportunity to also help each other. So that's been pretty awesome as well. So, but it's a lot of coordinating with all of these different, I've got my Excel sheet actually open on my other screen on my computer of, okay, who do I have committed to it that, who do I have their photo, bio, I send them all instructions in an email that they don't read. And then when they have to, all that stuff. So, but yes, we get the community very, very involved in this service.
So when you're doing the veterans, you're doing one at a time and things like that. So that you have 4 people involved in just that one service. And then when you're doing the civilians, you said there's multiple people. Do the civilians also get 4 people per, or do they share like, okay, I'm the, like one person's reading all the stories? Like, how does that work?
So we don't do that for the civilians. We do read their names. But last time we did a civilian burial, we did 86 people. So if we told 86 people's life stories, that would be pretty tough to do. We will do another civilian burial this fall. And right now, we're probably looking at over 300 people that will be interred in that service with multiple different funeral homes. So we don't do as much research on them for the service. So a lot of times what we'll do is we will actually have them in the vault ahead of time instead of carrying each one when we're looking at such a high number. So the veterans, we do a little bit different than the civilians. Same with the children. We read their names. Children is a little bit more of a touchy subject. We try not to put out too much information that would that somebody could be spiteful and try and find out why that child was, there's different reasons for that. And so we're a little bit more protective when it comes to the children.
Understandably. Yeah, no, I'm sure they would respect that. So now, if with this veteran, I'm the flag bearer, I get the flag, I'm going to hold on to it, and I'm going to treat this like I was presented this from my own father or sibling or whatnot. Now, what happens if all of a sudden someone steps up and, like you said, like, hey, I think you buried my father last week. Does that flag go to that individual? Do they get another flag? Like, how does that work?
Yep. So all of the flag recipients know that if family were to come back, that we would offer the family that flag. And so the gentleman who I was telling you about, we did present him with the flag from the service. And we always ask the family if they want the flag. And I've had one other family member say, no, they did not want it. They were okay with who that flag went to. And so, but that's always the option. And the flag recipients know that they are kind of we hope that people actually show up and they have to present the flag off. So, but yes, they know that. So if family would come forward, we would then give them the option for that flag.
Oh, that's very nice. Yeah.
Yeah.
And it's very touching too. And that way, at least, you know, I think if I was the family who stepped up, I feel like there's an extra touch to say, like, somebody was actually guarding my flag, like someone was protecting it. Like, it just, I don't know, I'm getting that vibe that, you know, it feels like, like
We
it was taken care
also,
of.
yeah, so we also get handmade flag cases for all of the flags. So we present those to the flag recipients. Another cool project that we started last year with it is, so last year we buried 25 people. So we had 20 veterans and 5 spouses. That's a lot of urns. And so even though we are a nonprofit and we do fundraising, to purchase all of those was going to be a pretty big chunk of change. So we actually coordinated with a high school shop class, and the high school shop class made all the urns for us last year, and they're going to do that again this year, which is pretty cool.
Oh, wow. And that's a win-win, because you're getting urns, but that shop class just learned to craft, and so that's a bonus for them too. That's a win for them too.
Yeah. And then the teacher took them to the service. So that was pretty awesome that they could see. And then last year, the shop class teacher was one of the people who received a flag. So they have one of the flags in their class displayed, showing, hey, this is what we did. It was pretty impactful to see a bunch of teenage boys get a little emotional about what we were doing. So that was pretty awesome.
Well, I think something like that too also shows respect. Like when you're getting high school age children involved like that too, I think there's a couple levels between one. Now you just learn respect for veterans. I think you learn that group just learned respect for people in general, and what respect really means and dignity means. But as we said, people don't talk about what we do. We're kind of that, people don't want to talk about what we do. They don't want to hear about it. So when people get involved, they go, wow, this is beautiful. I mean, we've had cases where we put the casket on, they go, they had a casket outside. Well, yeah, it's the funeral program that, it's what funeral homes do. We were moving it, but they, people turn something into something it wasn't. And it's like, no, that's beautiful. That's that casket, that urn, isn't saying like, this isn't a symbol of death. It is, but, it's furniture that you put somebody in. It's a hope chest that you put people in. It's, whatever the case may be. So it's something beautiful that represents that individual and has their characteristics behind it or something. So I always love when, more people learn what we're about.
That's why we try and get so many different people involved in the service, because it's about raising awareness. I mean, this is our 8th year that we're doing the service, and there's still people that are like, oh my gosh, we've never heard of this before. And we're very lucky because we get a lot of very positive media coverage here. I have a great relationship with our news outlets, but it's always like, I find these people and they're like, oh my gosh, I can't believe I didn't know about this, and I'm like, but people don't talk about it a lot. And that's why we're doing it, is so that hopefully people that see what we're doing can go to their local funeral home and be like, hey, are you guys sitting on a bunch of unclaimed remains? Or, just to or even be like, oh crap, whatever happened to Uncle Dave? Did anybody ever get him? Like, we should maybe call the funeral home and see where he's at.
Oh yeah. Well, I think, and and again, those in the industry know, they're already picturing the back closet, with the stuff in it. They all know what we're talking about. But I think for the general public too, I think a lot of people don't fully realize, because I think if you're, it's like same thing, anything else, right? If your family is good natured and gets along for the most part, and we always have that aunt that doesn't, but for the most part, your family gets along, and then you work in funeral service, or you work in like you're a wedding planner or something, and you're like, what the, and then you meet everyone else's family. You're like, I really like my family. you start loving your family because you start realizing the dynamic. But I think on the other end, I think when you're in this field too, I don't think when you have a family and you're like, oh yeah, I buried my parents, my children bury me, and it's been pretty good in my family. And I don't think people realize just how many people die estranged from their families, or how many people die, unless you've been through that and you've seen it. And I know we have a lot of people to do, but you don't realize how many people die that are estranged, or how many people that die that the woman was 90 years old, or she outlived all of her kids and she doesn't have kids, or, and that's something I have to consider, right? I don't have any kids. I have kids in like Germany and things like that. They're exchange kids, but like, I don't have, despite the 8 kids that have gone through my house, none of them are my biological kids. They're not, things like that. There's a consideration. What happens to me?
Mm-hmm. Well, and I think that estrangement is getting even worse. I had a gentleman, so it was 2020, it was during COVID, and I had a veteran who died with no family. I had a guardian. The guardian actually had been putting money away for this guy for eons. So we had a ridiculous amount of money sitting in a funded pre-plan. And because we had so much money, I said, you know what, let's write an obituary about him. Let's put him in our newspaper. We were restricted to the 10 people only at a funeral at that time. I said, but let's do like a procession that we can invite people to come out. They can drive their motorcycle, drive their car, whatever, not get out, but that's how we can do things and do our service this year. And so I found a high school photo of this gentleman, and he had a very distinct nose, like very distinct. And so we ran it in the newspaper, and the day of the service, I get a phone call that morning, and she's like, I think you guys have my brother, but it must be wrong. It must be somebody else, because my brother died 20 years ago. So I start asking her questions. I'm like, this sure sounds a lot like the guy I have in my chapel right now. And I said, where are you? And she goes, oh, I'm in Des Moines. I said, will you please come to the funeral home? I said, he was not cremated. I have his body here. Will you please come and look at him? She goes, yes. She comes in. Sure enough, that's her brother. She proceeds to tell me that her brother's ex-wife told her and their 3 children that he had died in Arizona 20 years prior. And he had been in this nursing home for 20 years, that not one single person came to visit him because they thought he was dead.
Oh my goodness.
So, yeah. So long story short, his kids were able to come to the service and they received his flag. And because he wasn't cremated, because we had those funds, thank goodness. Otherwise, they may have never known. So that was kind of a crazy situation to work through. But again, it's why we do it.
You never know. And it's, again, some of these things, we just can't make up these stories. Like, The
truth is stranger than fiction. 100%.
You start loving your family.
Right.
You really do. But yeah, no, you can't make up these stories. They're just too wild but I can't imagine that though. Like to tell, I mean, and I believe it because we see it all the time and I see it, but I could never imagine telling somebody that their sibling was dead and meanwhile they were there that whole,
I mean, my heart just like, and then the funeral director part of me was going through like all Iowa law, like, oh my gosh, like, am I going to be in trouble? All this stuff. And I mean, my heart just sank. I mean, that was a tough situation to work through. We ended up delaying the burial till the next day so that they could have some time, but that was a situation.
That's the thing. I don't think people realize how much we play like para-lawyer here, and how many times we have to reference the law in a day to just think about like, all right, how do I do this? I got this family and I'm really sure they're not married, or I don't know if this is really the kid, or I don't think people, what's the decedent's not going to tell you the answer.
Right. And we're not mind readers. Well, that's like when you get people that call that like, I heard that you buried so-and-so 3 months ago. Why didn't anybody notify me? We don't magically know who everybody is related to or how to get a hold of them. We do our due diligence, we do the best, but unfortunately we don't know who everybody is and what their relationship is and what their story is either. We don't know if there was ill will of not telling you or not. And and that's what we're finding out with a lot of our unclaimed veterans, because and unclaimed people in general, our number one goal is always to find family first. And so a majority of these urns we are able to get back. And we always say, no judgment. We just want to offer for you to have your person back if you want it. And 99.9% of the time, it's oh crap, I forgot. Or, oh crap, my brother was supposed to get mom. I am so sorry. And those are the ones, that's fine. But it's the rest of them those are the ones that we get to tell those stories and honor those people.
Yeah. No, definitely. And I know we would see with the next of kin thing, as you said, we don't know who got it. And if the brother and the sister don't talk, she's going to assume that he picked it up because it was his to get. And and nobody realizes that poor mom has been sitting there all these years, or something like that. So we see it a lot. That's the problem, is we see that more than we should. And or the arguments or things like that. I mean, how many times do people show up at the door on the opposite end and argue over who's going to get it? And so
How many
I'm glad. No. Nobody fights over that. I had a service year. This is a long time ago. I did the arrangement. All right, I didn't do the arrangements, and the other director was doing them. And so I answered the door, and I said, "Oh, hold on, he'll be right with you." I put the person I put the family rather in the arrangement room. I think it was like 2 people, or it was like 2 or 3 people that started, and it was the widow, and it was like a daughter or 2 daughters or something, if I remember right. And then I go back downstairs. He comes up, he meets with the family. The doorbell rings. Oh, I'll go get the door again. I come back upstairs. I answer it. By the time I was done, I answered the door for 9 individual people after that first group. He had eventually moved them to like what should be a 3rd parlor, or actually a 5th parlor if you divide that room up properly. So a 5th parlor in the area that had the conference table and the couches for chairs. It was like our oversized arrangement room. So they go in there, and as they're meeting, he comes down. I'm just downstairs doing office work, and he comes in, and he goes, "You won't believe this." I said, "Oh, you finished?" He goes, "No." And he goes, "I told him to figure it out, and that I was going to go type the obituary, call church, do whatever I was going to do." And he goes, "And when I come back up, you better have an answer." I said, "What does this mean?" And he says, "They don't know each other."
Oh.
He says, "None of them know each other." He goes, "Those first 2 or 3 people," he goes, "that's the mother and the daughters." He goes, "But what?" But he goes, 3 of those are mistresses. Another 3 of them are like, are children, that illegitimate children. They're illegitimate.
No.
They're illegitimate children that nobody knew existed. The mistresses didn't know about the children. The children don't know. It's like nobody knew about anybody. And I walk out. There was like legit like 12 people in this room by the time we were done, and nobody knew each other. And he goes, and they're all arguing over who's the next of kin, and over who has rights, because they all want something different. And I only had one question. How did they, for a service, we put that in the newspaper. We know when the service is.
Right. How did they find out?
How did you know when the arrangements were taking place? How did you know when they were doing the arrangement? Like someone there had to have been some middleman here going, "Hey, okay, go to this."
Because this will be really fun if you guys all show up.
Right. They didn't know each other. They didn't know each other existed. And they all show up to arrangements, not funeral arrangements. And I was like, I'm beside myself. I don't even know what to do. So, yeah.
You've just unlocked a new fear for me. Thank you.
It happens. I mean, how many times does I've had the ones where we don't know where our sister is. Nope. She's been estranged from the family for 20 years. We don't know where she is. We're signing all the paperwork. Okay. Here's our notarized. Please fill out the paperwork, notarize it, saying you don't know where your sister is. Perfect. And who shows up to the service? The sister. Who's talking to...
I will always look somebody up on Facebook and I'll be like, well, that's weird because you're Facebook friends with them.
Yeah. Who shows up? The sister. Who's talking to them like she's seen them every day because she has? The sister.
Yeah.
I'm like, legally, I have paperwork on file. My hands are clean. Legally, I know nothing. Yeah. So there's always going to be fears in this, but having dignified ways and not having to, again, as these state laws dictate, it's like, all right, after these long things of calling and certified letters. Or, okay, I can go scatter, but or it's going to cost me. That's going to be the cheap way, or otherwise I have to, as you said, pay for burials and things. So very good. Anything else that we missed? I'm trying.
I don't think so. I think the biggest thing is that we're just here to help. So if you are in a different state that you guys are like, oh my gosh, this would be a great program. Like I said, we're working on putting together the outline to make it easy for you. You don't need to reinvent the wheel. I've already done all the work. Please steal my ideas. That's what I want you to do. I know a lot of times in funeral service, there's like this gatekeeping of like, oh, this is what I do. Nobody else can do it. But we're the complete opposite of that. We want to help. And if there's anybody listening in Iowa, just give us a call. We'll come up and help you guys and make you guys look really good in the process.
Definitely the educator way. Like the amount of times someone goes, you can't see what I'm doing. It's my secret. I'm like, it's in the textbook. But but no, the educator way. I mean, this is how we grow. In the world, someone gave me wise advice a long time ago. They said you get so much, and I was in public health. We were trying to solve it. It was during COVID, all the places, all times too. I was crunching COVID data, and someone says you get so much more accomplished when you don't care who gets the credit for it. Because at the end of the day, people know who started it. People know who did things. They said, but they know where the idea came from. But someone's got to put it together. So, that's a good mentality. And that's the thing is, this is how we grow. We spread our word, and then if we all do well, you're in Iowa. So, if we do well in Massachusetts, then we all grow together, and families go, "Wow, that is a great way to do this." And then we build something that becomes something people value. And that's
absolutely,
absolutely. So we're going to see you. I know, a little shameless plug on my part here, but I know we have Lanae joining us in Bridgewater, Mass, for the Arrangement Skills Masterclass, which is if I understand right, the top level. I know there's a couple different levels you have of arrangement skills. I know we used to call it Arranger training. Now we call it the Arranger Skills Master class, which is awesome. So she'll be with us for 8 hours on September 26th. So I do encourage you guys to all sign up for that. And I know there's a lot of other on your website. You have them all over the state. So if you're not in Mass or if you don't want to fly out, then by all means, Lanae's awesome. She's doing this is a great way for you to learn. You may do arrangements, but you can always, like everything else, we can always improve and do better. So I don't know if you want to give a plug into what that is and what we've got to get ourselves into, but
yeah, the 8-hour class is honestly my favorite class. I love it. It seems to go faster than 8 hours. Every time I do it, I'm like, oh my gosh, our day went by so fast, and we learn from each other. It's a great way to talk about what we're doing in the arrangement conference with family, but also before we're meeting families, after we're meeting families, and just how to level up as a funeral director. You can be a funeral director for 20, 30 years, and you can always have room to grow. You're not only going to learn from me, but other people in the room when we share ideas and talk about what's working for you and what's not working. So I really love when we have all different levels of experience in that class, from students to people that have been licensed, 5-10 years to the 40-year people. Because it's cool to see everybody get together. It's also nice to see people make some really cool connections of, hey, you know what, you're young or you're a student. Are you looking for a job? And maybe somebody that is owning a funeral home is there watching those students go through the class. And I've had a few classes like that people have found jobs coming to them too. So that's a pretty awesome segue that can happen in that class as well.
No, it's definitely, I love the network. And that's when you get that many people, networking is inevitable. And when knowing who to call and getting to meet people is awesome. But also, as you said, the ideas that come from that and how much you can learn from each other is incredible. This is going to be the third time I'm going to go through this class. And I can say I've learned something new every single time that I did, and I'm taking notes. This is not the kind of stuff. I mean, we do teach these things in classes too, but this is not the stuff you learn in class. We teach you to be a funeral director. We teach you to do arrangements. We teach you in class how to do the basics of that, but this is taking it to like any seminar, this is taking it to the next level on how to really work with those families. So we appreciate you coming.
I'm excited for it.
Yeah, and those that want to fly out, come join us. Again, there's a lot of things in a lot of states. Lanae goes to every state and does this. So, but but we do have a hotel, and we are between Logan and Green. So my own shameless plug. We're happy. We've got a train on the campus. We'll get you there if you can come from Boston by the train. So, but yeah, no, seriously, go to the NFDA website, go to the arrangement and the training classes, and you'll see all the schedule that Lanae has for all of the classes that she teaches. And you can definitely sign up for it through the website. If you are a student for any mortuary institution, you do have to use the phone call. You have to call the NFDA in order to sign up for your student discount. Otherwise, you're paying the full rate. But,
and the discount is fantastic for students, so it's worth calling for it.
Yeah, guys, please sign up. And I'm going to say the same thing I do to my students every day and leading up to this training on September 26th is I told them, you were about to pay, it was $165 compared to like $500 or $600 when you get licensed.
It's a significant discount.
Yeah, seriously, guys, even if you don't want this, tell your employer, pay for it, because if you can't afford it, your employer will, because if you wait a year or two and your employer is going to pay for you to take this class, they're going to pay you're going to pay 4 or 5 times more.
Yep.
You know what? There's a discount for them to pay for you today. There's, it's a good selling point. So seriously, it's well worth it. I tell my students that every day. It's well worth it to do it while you're a student. But now this is open to everybody. Bring, employers, funeral directors, non-funeral directors, whatever, come, but students. So, yep. No, we do look forward to you joining us.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to it.
Thank you for listening to this episode of Mortuary Mayhem. For links to information discussed during this episode, please visit the website at www.mortuarymayhem.com. Do you have questions, comments, suggestions for topics, or want to be a guest on the show? Email us at podcast@mortuarymayhem.com. We should do this again sometime.